we do have some news here. Starting off with Switch 2 price will, quote, consider the affordability customers expect from Nintendo. So basically in here, Furukawa was on a call, or during a Q&A, was delivering some thoughts on their financials. And hey, Nintendo has to take into account Japan's increased inflation rate. It also has to consider that the exchange rate environment has changed considerably since the Switch launched in 2017. But they also note they have to consider that our customers expect from Nintendo, or the affordability that our customers expect from Nintendo products. This is, referencing the fact that when you think about like console prices, Nintendo has been aiming low, and it has worked out well for them in the past.
Yeah, historically, they're like the go-to budget option for people that want to get some kind of console that don't already have one. Things like the Switch Lite, for example. I know a bunch of people who have gotten Switch Lite that don't usually play video games otherwise. And obviously, the 3DS had a bunch of cheap options out there, the 2DS especially, which, in my opinion, was the best of their line of 3DSs, was the 2DS. That
Their
had
best?
the weird, like, yeah, because it just felt so good to hold, the like square feeling one.
Huh.
That was the best one in my opinion. Uh,
Okay.
but this whole story in general is basically, they were asked like, hey, is the Switch gonna be cheap? And he kind of danced around the question, but he's like, yeah, it's probably gonna be cheap, and that's in line with what we've been hearing about the Switch.
Yeah.
Where leaks are saying like somewhere from 350 to 450, and that's pretty cheap in comparison to the other consoles on the market.
So, some people were trying to say like, oh, this could reach 500, and there is that question of like, in a world where the prices are going up in not just like consoles but hardware, like Sony has pushed up the price of their PS5s everywhere except here in the United States. They're trying their hardest right now, and so if Nintendo were to take advantage of that, there's an argument to be made. Would it impact their sales? Maybe.
Here's the thing: if the Switch is $400 and there's a 25% tariff,
You're right. Yes.
that's
Yes.
500.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe that's the play then. Maybe that's the play. They go cheap, knowing that there's a good chance tariffs throw everything out of whack, and then they still look like a normal console.
Well, that's only if they're manufacturing out of China, which maybe.
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I am unsure. But I'm, on the one hand, this is like, you would say this if you were in his position, like, hey, we need to keep the prices low somewhat so that people can buy this damn thing. At the same time, it's really nice to hear someone in the business end of Nintendo acknowledge, like, let's keep this down, because like they're competitors in their specific market, which is not just consoles but like the portable consoles like the Steam Deck. And I think that's a great value for people who enjoy Steam and PC gaming normally. And then you've got, there are other, the ROG Ally and a couple others.
And they're obviously going to be looking to undercut the prices that those are going for right now, is basically what they're almost certainly doing. And, it is important to consider for them too that the yen has been battered in the past year. It's at like a crazy all-time low in its value. I mean, that makes traveling there really cheap, but it kind of sucks for people who want to buy things that live there and use that money.
Right. And, it's the Switch, it's Nintendo, it's going to sell everywhere, but you better believe they have Japan in mind when they're figuring out their business strategy. So
it's always been their strategy of thinking Japan first and just hoping that foreign markets are just also going to like it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I think we've had conversations numerous times of like Nintendo Switch's online stuff and why it's so weird. And it's because like the people who are especially at the upper end, I imagine, of Nintendo are like, don't be talking to us about how the West online works. We don't do that here.
It's also infamously why their controllers are so small. People have, on average, smaller hands in Japan by a pretty
Oh.
large margin. And so they make smaller button layouts to accommodate for the audience that they're originally making their consoles for, having smaller hands on average. And as a man with tiny hands,
Uh-huh.
I appreciate it.
Sure. Well, okay. So, okay. All right. Now I'm thinking in a different direction. Screw this news story. I'm thinking something else. I want, like, okay, so you remember the old DualShocks? Like, they went from
Yeah.
PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2 and 3. It was basically that same, case, that same shell. And then PS4 and 5, they've been having to change. And I've always been thinking in the context of, America, the West, of like, oh, people really like the 360 controller, so clearly they're changing.
They do. They're incredibly popular here.
Yes, and so they're changing their controller to try and mimic that, because to us, or at least to me, the old PlayStation DualShocks, like, they were small, but the idea is you would let them sit in your fingers, and you would hold it that way, and maybe like press them together with like your knuckles right here. And like,
Right.
the
But
point is, yeah,
that was never actually the intent, though,
right?
because I cannot hold a DualShock that way.
Really?
I have
Okay.
really small hands.
Okay.
And that's a very uncomfortable way for me to hold a DualShock. I hold it fully in my hand.
Interesting.
Both of the handles, and that's how I hold all my controllers.
Yeah, I just didn't think of that. So okay, so yeah, and then I guess people in America were complaining about the small size of the controller, and I was like, that's just because you're not holding it right. You're holding it the way Xbox intends to, and there are people with small hands that are like, what the fuck?
But actually, as it turns out, it's that hand sizes are literally smaller in Japan, and Sony and Nintendo, both Japanese companies.
Turns
the
out.
available testing markets that they were initially working with were Japanese people who, on average, have smaller hands because they're on average smaller. If you're talking height, it's like an average differential of 3 inches between the average Japanese person and American person.
Right.
And that applies in all categories.
That makes a lot of sense. But now I have a question for you. How do you feel about this PS5 controller?
I have never once held a PS5 controller.
Oh, okay.
I think the best controller ever made is the Xbox Elite Series X2.
Sure. I've heard good things.
I love that controller, and I use it for basically everything.
Okay.
But I don't think it's... I think it's a good middle ground of size. I think you could probably use it well if you have large hands. And having had small hands, you kind of get used to things being a bit large for you.
I see.
So it's never been an issue.
All right. So, but you're down with the Switch kind of staying what it is.
In fact, Joy-Cons are super comfortable for me.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's great. I mean, they come... Doesn't the console come with the little adapter that you can slide the Joy-Cons into and hold like a controller? I think that feels fine. Like, it's not a deal breaker for me in any way. So that's So, I hope the price stays small, because let me tell you, I just got myself a PS5 to get ahead of tariffs. So
yeah,